Today on Faces of Florence, Ashley Neighbors. We all want our children to be known and loved, and during the middle school years, that can be especially difficult, which is why we're so glad Ashley Neighbors is answering the call to build relationships with students during these crucial formative years.
Hey, welcome. We're so glad you found us. Radio Free is a 24-hour Christian mixed radio station broadcasting right here out of Florence, South Carolina. So when you're driving around town, remember to tune it in to 92.5. And if you're outside of the Florence area, you can listen 24 hours a day at radiofree.cc.
Ashley Neighbors, welcome to Faces of Florence. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're glad you're here. The idea behind Faces of Florence is to create a platform for the Florence community to kind of get to know each other. We keep saying over and over, we're called to love our neighbors. It's hard to love your neighbor if you don't know who they are, right? So we brought you here because you're a neighbor, literally. Right? But also you are a integral part of an organization called isCLC. We're going to get into that in a minute, but let's start by just talking a little bit about you. Tell me about you. Where were you born and raised?
Okay, I was born right here in Florence at the old McLeod Hospital, 1977. Don't know if it seems long ago, but not really, and if you think about it.
You're young.
Young. Grew up here in Florence, went off to college, left for a little bit for seminary. The Lord took us several places and then brought us back to Florence. Took a little hiatus for about 18 years and then came back. So hometown girl.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people do. My daughter's at the age now where she wants to get out of here so bad. And I was there as well, but I'm right back here too. And there's something special about Florence, and so we're glad you're back. You are a boy mom.
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Tell me
Okay.
about your boys.
I have a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an almost 9-year-old. He has a birthday in a couple weeks. So I'm already kind of transitioning him to 9. So yes, full life going on with our boys. Yes, they're into sports, music, church, whatever they can get into, basically. So yeah.
Full-time job being a mom, period.
Yes.
But 3 boys, I can't even imagine. So we'll be praying for you on that. But you're here to talk a little bit about isCLC. We are fans of isCLC. It's a fantastic organization. For those who don't know about it, and I think there's a lot of people who don't, we're going to try to change that a little bit today. But for those who don't know about it, can you maybe give us a description of what it is and how it works?
Sure. All right. So I actually was one of those people that didn't know much about it until Nathan started serving on the board. Nathan's my husband. I didn't mention that earlier. But I actually was working at a preschool when they approached me about working there. isCLC is Christian Learning Center, and it is school release time Bible class. And so we actually service the middle schools of the Florence area. So 7th and 8th graders, which is a fun time in teenage timing, I should say. Southside, Williams, Moore, and Sneed. I think I got all of them. But anyway, 4 schools, and we serve their 7th and 8th grade, and we walk through the life of Jesus. We're basically sharing the good news with these teenagers. And a lot of them, surprisingly, even though we're in the Bible Belt, have never heard it. And so I think that's where I get excited about it, because even though you would think, oh, I'm from Florence, everybody knows about Jesus, that's not quite the case that I'm finding anyway.
Well, that's obviously so incredibly important to people like us. But it sounds probably maybe to somebody on the outside like, oh, that's just a church function. But this is not. This is a really interesting pairing.
Yes.
Would you describe that a little bit?
All right. So isCLC, the way it works, and a lot of people are confused. They think we meet at the school. It's actually school release time because of the content of our class. So we meet our students, usually depending on the school. The school where I serve, we usually have about 20 to 25 kids in a class. And we either walk them to an off-campus site. That only happens in 2 schools. The other 2, they have to drive. And it's typically at a church who is sponsoring us, and they allow us to use their building. And it is all about the gospel, but it's also about relationships. So we spend a lot of time getting to know the kids, finding out about their lives, what their, kind of their background, so we know where they're coming from. And then we use that time to introduce them to the Bible and to God and then his son Jesus. And so it's 9 weeks of not intensive. I mean, I would say it's intensive, but to them it's not, of just really showing them the story of Jesus and who he is.
This is off of the campus of the school.
Correct.
So there's no conflict there, legally speaking.
Correct.
But it is sanctioned by the school?
So the school has to give us permission to be there. And now I don't know if they've gone to each school and asked per se, or if it was a district, they voted on, yes, you can have this class. But in order to be in the class, the child has to have permission from their legal guardian so that we're not telling them something that the parent doesn't want them to know.
Right.
So yes, so no, legally we're off campus and we have permission to be with their child. So yeah.
Well, let's key in a little bit on the relational part of it, because we're fans of that here in the Bible Belt. Sometimes that can get lost in the mix, and so I'm excited that you guys are taking that direction right out of the gate. So talk a little bit about that. That, like you said at the beginning, that's an awkward time, man. The 7th and 8th grade are tough. Tell me a little bit about how that works, and maybe in this day and age, what are some of the things that you come across on a regular basis that kids are struggling with?
Yeah. So it is an awkward age, 7th and 8th grade, but it's also a really special time because they're searching, which I think is why it's such a good age for us to see them. They're thinking about things. They're very open to things, which is good and bad. But what we try to do is to get to know who they are as a person. So on days I'll have a set lesson that I want to teach, of course, but then we get to this point, and a lot of times we don't have free time because they have so many questions, which is a great thing, because what we want is for them to come to know who Jesus is, but we want them to come to their own faith, not what I'm saying to them. And so a lot of times we do have the end of class, there's tons and tons of questions that we have to kind of focus on. But when we don't, we try to spend that time visiting with one another, or fellowship, whatever you want to call it, and just kind of finding out about who they are, what they're interested in. A lot of times it's sports with that age. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, I'm going to the NFL, I'm going to the NBA, and I'm like, I hope you have a second plan. But they are very much open to someone that they know cares about them. And so a lot of the times it's more about making sure they understand I care about who they are as a person and who they are and what their interests are. You asked about struggles that I see. A lot of the struggles I see with this particular age group is what culture is feeding them. Very much interested in music that I would say probably isn't feeding them spiritually.
Sure. Right.
Very interested in sports and the success they can find within those sports. And in a roundabout way, I try to address a lot of those issues. Not in your face where they're going to cut me off completely, but to the point that they think more about it. A lot of issues with family, a lot of broken families, a lot of not understanding why relationships within their family work the way they do. And honestly, I wish I could have them for a lot longer, because there's a lot in the Old Testament that we could teach them that would be working with their own families. But we specifically stick to Jesus's life in the gospel. But yeah, a lot of brokenness and a lot of confusion about what is being taught to them, culturally speaking, I would say.
So are most of the kids that come to CLC already church kids?
No, actually, I at my school, I can't speak for every school, but I feel like it's probably across the board the same. There is a group who know, like when we start the class, they're already like, check mark, I'm getting 100 in this class. Right. I know all the answers. But even with those kids, a lot of them, I don't think they know it, but they don't know it. Like they have the head knowledge, but not necessarily the heart knowledge. So even in that aspect, I feel like every student that walks in the door is a work in progress. Yeah. Someone that even though they might know, I still have room to work with them. And so, but overwhelmingly, at least at my school, a lot have never even heard. I have to sit and show them how to find what we're looking for in the Bible. They've never even, they might have seen one, but they haven't actually opened one up and looked into it or even know what's inside of it. So very much blank canvases so far. Well,
then those kids, let's talk about those kids for a minute. How do they get introduced to CLC, and how do they? That's a good question. How do their parents sign off? You're supposed to sign up for your electives at the middle school level. They send you a list, and I think they actually even give them a tiny tidbit of what each class is. Say, art, music, dance,
CLC. And CLC is the initials, so they do have to kind of work at figuring out what it is. But they do give a little snippet of what it is. And then on that very first day of class, I actually send home with them a very detailed letter for their parents about what we'd be covering and how their questions would be answered and the background that we're coming from so that they know for absolute certain what they're getting into. But most kids, at least I found, I've only been here for a couple of years since moving back, a lot of kids know about the class, aren't excited about it, even though they don't quite understand all that's going to take place in it, if that makes sense.
They are excited about it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They all come up. Are you teaching this year? Are you teaching this year? In fact, I had a student work who, well, now graded there at my church, and so they know they were really upset with COVID because we had to stop teaching for a little bit. So, yeah, typically I find that people are real excited about it. I have had a few that parents will not give permission. And that happens. So,
After the initial letter, do you get some pushback too?
From students?
Usually you send a letter home to the parents, explaining what's what.
Yeah.
Do you get some pushback at that point?
I have not. Now, I've had a few refuse to sign the permission slip, and some of them are actually legitimate concerns. One parent didn't want their kid off campus. One wasn't interested in the content of the class, but I've never had anybody be upset about it because, like I said, they kind of have to sign up to be in the class, so they want to be there. And typically, if they want to be there, their parents are on board.
Well, let's talk about these kids then, and either some examples or just your hopes for when they leave class, when they leave the 9 weeks, and they're now in the general population of the school. What are you hoping they're bringing with them?
So we spent a lot of time, like I told you, they asked lots of questions. I mean, which actually is my favorite part of the day because I can tell them all day long about the Bible and Jesus and what I know and what I feel. But at the end of the day, when they're asking their questions and leaving, my hope is that they're constantly processing what we've talked about, talking about it with other kids, even if it's not so much in an evangelistic perspective. It's more of, hey, why don't you figure this out with me? And when they do leave the 9 weeks, so we walk through the creation story and original sin, because if they don't understand that, there's no point going further. And then we walk into the life of Jesus, and we take the rest of the time to walk specifically through that. We watch some movies. We do, because visually, this generation is very much visually stimulated, I should say. So we watch some movies, we talk about it, and then we give them a Bible at the end of the time. And we open that Bible every day, except for probably test day, because each week we have a test to make sure they're actually paying attention. Not that I could care less about the test scores, because that's not the point of the class. But without having something to do, they're not going to pay attention. So except for test day, we open the Bible every day. So my hope is when they leave, we give them a Bible. CLC provides them with the same Bible they've been looking at all quarter. And so my hope is that when they leave, they're not just going to stop, that they will open that up. And I actually introduce them to, I know some of you don't like paper. Now, me personally, I want a book, but I show them the digital version. I'm like, you can look up anything you want. You can ask, find me a scripture about this. Because a lot of them, I think it does start with their cultural issues. Like, how does God feel about homosexuality? How does God feel about drinking? How does God feel about this? How does God feel about divorce? And so a lot of that is where they kind of get pulled in. And so my hope is that they keep looking and they keep searching. And I will tell them, I'm like, I'm here every day. Come back if you need
come
to.
Talk to me, right?
Yeah. And so no, I do have a lot of them come back and see me, but not for serious questions or anything, just because they're like, oh, I miss you, I want to see you. So,
well, you sound like the right person for the job, for sure. And it seems like you're really making some connections. Kind of the overall concept of this video series is about Florence as a community. And so one of the questions I try to ask my guests is, what do you think what you're doing how is it helping the Florence community? I mean, some of it's obvious. We've talked about some of it, but maybe in a bigger perspective, if someone's watching right now and they're maybe not sold on Jesus even, and maybe they're thinking, why should I even care about CLC? Right. What would you say?
Honestly, I would say for this particular age group, 7th and 8th grade, and they're, like I said, searching and open, even if they don't walk away with the, salvation, which sometimes, obviously, that's not going to happen. I'm praying seeds are planted and things will, come to fruition eventually. But I do hope that they walk out of the class, because as we talk about Jesus and we talk about his character, I hope that it's helping them in their everyday life of how do I treat other people in my school? How do I talk to people? What am I listening to? What am I doing? All of that, hopefully it's making a difference for them as they walk through life because, like I said before, they are very confused. They are this particular age group with their hormones and just all the emotions that they feel. They are so confused in life. And so my hope is that this is giving them some truth and some light so that as they walk through and hopefully eventually find salvation, that they're still seeing how to do life well and how to do life, hopefully, kindly, with mercy and grace.
And that impacts the Florence community in a big way,
right?
right? Yeah.
So as they continue on, hopefully that will, flourish in them.
Well, let's wrap things up a little bit now, and let's talk about maybe something you can share with our viewers that is impacting you right now. Something you're reading or watching, or
okay. I didn't think about watching, but that's a good one. So this over quarantine, we've been kind of stuck at home. Like you said, I'm home with 3 boys. And so we actually, over the quarantine, watched a show called The Chosen. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was really good for us. Like I said, visually, they're very much stimulated by, they can read. My oldest loves to read, my middle one not so much, and my younger one's still learning. And so that visual connection to the Bible was really good for our family and just talking points, especially with our almost 9-year-old who had lots of questions. So that was a good talking point for us as a family. And then the other thing we're doing is called the 7 Arrows. Now we're doing the teen version because, like I told you, we have 2 teens in our house, and my husband's a youth minister, and so teens are kind of in the forefront of our lives. Yeah. And so it's just a book walking through the Bible, helping teenagers kind of put it all together. And each day you read a scripture, and then it asks you, well, it doesn't ask you, it says, when you read this scripture, what is God telling you? What does it tell us about God? What does it tell us about you? What does it help you pray about, or what does it lead you to pray about? And so for us, that's helped with our kids and the teenagers that we work with, just to make sure they're getting in the Bible every day and they're reading scripture, and that even as you read it, why was it written? Because every scripture has a point, and every scripture, if you think about it and you actually read it in context, has a reason that it's there. And so that's kind of been good for us as well.
Ties it all together.
Yeah.
That's called 7 Arrows.
The 7 Arrows.
Excellent. Well, let's end with some ways to contact you and to learn more about CLC for anybody who's watching. What's a good place to get up with you, and if someone has questions specifically for you, and then how would someone get more information about CLC? Well,
I know CLC has just posted a new website, or easier to manage, I should say, website, FlorenceCLC.org, and it could show you what we're about, the curriculum. I mean, it pretty much will walk you through anything you want. It also, I believe, lists the board members if you wanted to talk to somebody on there, and then, of course, the teachers. And I honestly, I don't know, Facebook, you can.
Yeah,
not
CLC
very socially savvy,
right.
But CLC on Facebook, and even myself, you're welcome to look me up on Facebook.
All right. Well, we'll put all that stuff in the links. We'll put links to all that stuff in with the video.
Yeah.
So, well, Ashley Neighbors, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for stopping by and checking out this week's episode of Faces of Florence. A big thank you to Ashley Neighbors for being this week's guest. As always, we will include links along with the video. Follow those links to learn more about CLC. And hey, spread the word. Let somebody know about this fantastic program right here in the Florence Public Schools. Every Tuesday, we release a brand new episode of Faces of Florence, so check back next week. My name is Kevin Smith, and this has been a Radio Free production.